Welcome, everyone. My name is Penny Wyatt, and I am the Director of Family Programs at Tulane University. And I am so happy that you have joined us tonight for this very important webinar. It's called Know Before They Go for the Freeman Study Abroad and Exchange programs that are on offer for fall and spring, this coming fall 26 and spring 27. So I'm happy to um, turn things over to my colleagues in the Freeman School, and they'll be our presenters tonight, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Hicks, and I'm the director of Freeman Study Abroad and Exchange. I've been at Tulane for almost 8 years now, and before that, I was in the field for about 24 years at the University of New Orleans. And I'm happy to be your primary presenter tonight. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Bix. I am a senior program coordinator in the Freeman Study Abroad and Exchange office. I primarily support our incoming exchange students, and I've been in my role for about 4 years now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Forbes. I, too, am a senior program coordinator at Freeman Study Abroad and Exchange. I'm the primary outgoing student advisor, and I, too, have been at the office for just about 4 years.
So everyone, I will join you again at the Q&A, and I'll turn things over now to Mary to review the agenda for tonight.
All right. Thanks, Penny. So just quickly, this brief overview of what we're going to be doing. We're just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing. We're going to discuss Tulane's study abroad structure in general. We're going to go over what's next for your students, and then we're going to go over logistics around housing, booking travel, passports and visas, finances, academics, health and safety, and then how to keep your student involved. So we're going to move on and start with talking about, next slide, please, Penny. Sorry. Before we start talking about logistics, let's move on to the next slide, Penny. This is my piece, my soapbox. We are so excited for your student. Congratulations to them. And we hope that you're excited for them as well. Congratulations to you for helping them come to this point where they're preparing to embark on this incredible experience. Your presence in this webinar really does show how much you love them and want the best for them. And we hope that having this information allows you to support them and to better understand what they're going through and what's expected of them. This is a tremendous learning curve for our students. They are young adults. We believe very strongly that by supporting them while allowing them to take ownership of this process, provides that opportunity for them to take these huge, massive strides in maturity, self-reliance, and cultural literacy. Sometimes this means that families might need to allow your student to make those tough choices and navigate some tough situations on their own. Sometimes that can be very difficult for families. And understanding when to step in and when to step back is really an important role for our families as you work through this as family members and loved ones of our students. So we do ask that you keep that in mind now, but also particularly while they're going through their study abroad experience. This is a huge leap for our students. So next slide. Thank you. Okay, so how is study abroad at Tulane structured? Next slide. We have two study abroad offices at Tulane. The larger study abroad office is the Office of Study Abroad, or OSA, and they serve all NTC students. So they serve all undergraduate students at Tulane, including business students. The Freeman Abroad office, we have our own Freeman dedicated study abroad office just for business that allows our students to pursue business credits abroad on our programs. We do have a curated list of programs. It's a much narrower list than the Office of Study Abroad. Their office serves approximately 1,000 students a year. Our office serves about 200 students a year. So we're a smaller operation, but we focus on business credits and high quality business partnerships with business schools around the world. Where we overlap is where students might want to either get non-business credits on a Freeman program, or where students might want to study on an OSA program and still get business credits. So what we have done in the last 2 years is to create a list of pre-approved programs through OSA that our business students can go on and get more business credits on those programs. So there is quite a lot of overlap, and we coordinate very closely with the Office of Study Abroad, but we are separate offices. We have separate procedures, separate application processes, and different advising requirements. Basically, we do a lot more academic advising for the business students because we can focus on business. So it is kind of important to understand the difference between those offices, and whether your student is on a Freeman program or an OSA program. It is very important to understand that distinction. All right, next slide. All right, so the Freeman Abroad programs are all direct enroll bilateral exchange programs. They are for either the fall or the spring semester. What happens is we partner directly with business schools around the world. And our students pay Tulane tuition and they become a student at the partner institution, and vice versa. Those students are paying whatever tuition they pay at their home school, and they're coming to Tulane. So we do have that active partnership where we're sending and receiving students. So that's why a big part of Lauren's job is handling our international exchange students who are here. They provide so much value to our classrooms here in New Orleans, and our social environment at Tulane. But it's also important to remember that these students are going through a lot, and they're having to be very independent. They are required to participate fully in that host institution's enrollment procedures. They have to abide by their academic calendar. They can join their student organizations. They could take advantage of their student support services. And whether or not the partner offers housing, they can usually take advantage of any kind of housing offerings. So, it's important for families to remember that these students are not, we're not sending a Tulane staff member to these locations. We have partner institutions where there's an international office on site in country, but they are not Tulane employees. And so it's a very independent process and provides for that really intense immersion that our students do get to experience. All right, next slide. Now, those programs that are Freeman approved through the Office of Study Abroad we do have a list. We do link to our website here. So when you get a copy of this presentation, you can go to that website and you can click on the non-Freeman Study Abroad options and see the list of Freeman approved programs and see how what the policies are for each type of program. So these, I think it's 12 Freeman approved OSA programs. Students can feasibly go on one of these programs and get, anywhere from 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 business credits. It really does depend on the program. In general, those programs are not in general, specifically, those programs are supported by the Office of Study Abroad. They are not administratively supported by our office, so we can't advise students on, things like housing and logistics. What we do help students with is that business credit transfer. So we try to provide as many answers as we can to those students as to how those credits are going to transfer back to Tulane and whether or not they can apply them to their business curriculum. Applying electives from study abroad to the business curriculum is kind of unique for each student. And so we like to talk to every student individually, and we spend a lot of time doing that. So we hope that if your student is on an OSA program wanting to get business credit, that they are working with us to make sure that they can maximize those business credits. All right, next slide. Some of the benefits of going through the Freeman Abroad programs are that students can study at top business schools internationally. They they also, like that's one of the really exciting things is that they can take business classes that are not taught at Tulane. That's the main idea is that they're not taking something that they could just take at Tulane anyway. Um, they're really delving into areas of study that might be specific to the location, or there might be a department at a university that does different levels of study in different areas that we don't do, or a teacher offers a cool elective class that students really like to take. They can transfer anywhere from 12 to 18 business credits. The classes are offered in English at all of our partner institutions, but most do allow students to study in the local language if the student has the proficiency to do so. And then because Tulane students maintain Tulane status, pretty much all of their financial aid and scholarships will apply like they normally do. Of course, it depends on the individual awards, but basically, they continue with their regular enrollment in financial aid as they would if they stayed at Tulane for a semester because they maintain their Tulane status. Students also have access to Tulane support when they're on these programs, such as Crisis 24, which we'll talk about, travel services, advising from our office, success coaching, all the stuff that Tulane offers. Just, while they're abroad, they can still access these things. All right, next slide. It is important to remember that there are certain things that we do not do. We cannot apply for housing on behalf of students, and we really cannot assist students in finding housing. We do generally show students where the partner institution provides that kind of information. We can give, like general advice, but that is not something that we can assist with. We cannot enroll students in classes at the host institutions. It is important that students are enrolling themselves. We cannot alter foreign transcripts that we receive. So whatever grade and credit a student receives from a foreign institution, we have to report that. That does include failing grades. I will say, however, the grades are not calculated into the GPA for these study abroad classes. That is for OSA and for Freeman. All study abroad class grades are, the grade is reported on the transcript, but they don't affect the GPA. So if a student gets a lower grade in the class than they'd like to get, it's not going to affect their GPA. We also can't intervene with a foreign country or a partner institution's policies and or procedures. So, if a student is having trouble getting a visa, we can't intervene with the country. And then if a student is having difficulty maybe with a professor or a policy at the local institution, the host institution, they do have to abide by that institution's policies and procedures. We cannot intervene. So next slide. All right, so what's next for your student? They have been offered placement at a host institution at this point. How do they know what to do next? They need to consult their Freeman Abroad portal. All of these students have access to the Freeman Abroad portal. There's a lot of information that they need to be reading. We do have a lot of content where students tend to just like mark it as read to make it disappear. We encourage them to, even if they've read something once, to go back sometimes and read it 2 or 3 times. They have access to that information, even if they've already marked it as read. Next slide. In general, most of our students have been nominated to their host institutions, and many are working on their secondary applications. We're going to talk about what those 2 things are in a second. But each institution's timeline, procedures, and academic calendar is different. So the students at this point, once they're nominated to the host institution, really do need to be paying attention to the information that the host institution is sending them. And they should be reading, researching, preparing all kinds of other things, right? What kind of documents do they need for that secondary application? Some of our partners require official transcripts, some don't. What kind of preparations can be made for the student visa applications? A lot of times students need to start collecting documents for their student visa application. Now is the time that they should be doing that. What's the host institution's academic and local culture like? That's something that they can start looking into. They can start talking with prior students. They have access to a list of prior students in their Freeman Abroad portal. They can also, Google, or they can go on YouTube and see a day in the life of a student at, let's say, Rotterdam School of Management. They need to start thinking about what kind of housing they might need, and they want to think about that. They might want to connect with other students who have gone on these programs, or they can connect with students who are here now from these institutions. They can reach out to us if they'd like to do that. Most of this information can be found in their Freeman Abroad portal. We try to make sure that we put a lot of information in there so that they can have access to it when they need it, and that they can go back to it and refer to it. All right, next slide. Thank you, Penny. What is nomination? These questions got asked when we did a webinar last time, and so I wanted to make sure that we did clarify. So basically, when a student applies for a study abroad program with Freeman Abroad, once we offer them a placement, we have to send their information to the partner institution. So that's called a nomination. Nominate the student as a representative of Tulane, an exchange student who is going on behalf of Tulane through this partnership. And so we send them what we call a nomination. Every partner institution's nomination time is different. And so Mr. Forbes has been carefully nominating students as those nominating periods have come available, and emailing students as soon as they are nominated. After the students are nominated to our partners, they each must submit whatever information the partner institution requires. So like I said, some require official transcripts, some require other types of documentation. They do have to provide that, and they have to provide that on the timeline that the partner institution tells them to follow. If they miss a deadline and the partner institution has a hard deadline, it might be a tough conversation that we're having with the students. So we want to make sure that they understand they really do need to be paying attention to the information sent directly to them from the partner. Yeah, so I think we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Penny. What happens after nomination? After your student is nominated to the host institutions, they're going to receive those direct instructions. I do want to mention also that we do not have students turned away at this stage. We nominate students to partner institutions, they accept them. The only time a student might be turned away at this stage is if they miss a really critical deadline. So it is important that they're following the procedures and the timeline set forth by the partner institution. But if they follow all that, they're not going to be turned away from the secondary application. Once that secondary application is complete, each student should expect to receive official acceptance notification from the host institution. A lot of times that official notification or that official acceptance has to be used for the student to apply for a student visa in country. So a lot of times they'll get a official letter from the partner institution that they'll have to provide to the country that they're going to as documentation of acceptance. In general, each student is going to receive a login and an email address from the host institution, and they are expected to check that email address really frequently. A lot of times important information is sent to the students. It is not sent to us. We're not able to remind students. They really do need to be on the ball and start checking that email address and keep checking their Tulane email address. And then each student is going to have to enroll in classes according to the host university schedule and enrollment policies. Some of our host institutions ask for students to enroll in classes or to voice class preferences in the secondary application. Some wait until after they arrive in August, and all the way, everything in between. So it really is critical that students are communicating directly with the host institutions. Have I said that enough? Next slide, please. All right, housing. So let's talk about housing. A lot of times students, as soon as they receive our placement offer, they want to book that housing and travel right away. They want to book their flights and they want to book their housing. We suggest that students wait until they receive more information from the host institution before completing their housing arrangements. It really does depend heavily on what each institution offers. And that is listed on the brochure page for each of the partner institutions, or in the institution's fact sheet. They have we link to each institution's a fact sheet is basically a PDF brochure of that institution's like main points for exchange students. And so it's really important that students are doing their research on what is on offer and what are the parameters of the housing of the partner institution. We also link to the Tulane's off-campus housing portal here. Sometimes students want to sublet their New Orleans housing while they're abroad. And so we have found that off-campus housing portal to be quite a good tool for our students to use. It is protected with a Tulane login, so students do need to log into that themselves. Next slide. Now, Tulane's travel management policy does require that all students book their travel using Tulane's Concur travel system and or with World Travel Services. This information is in the Freeman Abroad portal. It's on our website. Basically, we need to make sure that students are booking through central booking in all circumstances, unless there's some kind of extraordinary circumstances. Concur is the name of the online travel booking system that students can access via their Gibson portal. World Travel Services is the travel agency that's contracted by Tulane to assist students and all Tulane travelers with international travel. They can be very helpful. We do recommend it for international flights. They can be very helpful in reducing or eliminating layovers outside of the US. And generally, they're offering refundable fares. Tulane does find that it is much better not to book super, super cheap fares, because then if something happens, you're left holding the bag, basically. And then by booking through Concur or World Travel Services, students do receive Tulane support in case they need to be evacuated or they need ticket changes or on-site emergencies such as global pandemic, natural disaster. As you may be able to tell, we learned a lesson in COVID when it hit, and we needed to bring all kinds of Tulane researchers, students, professors back to wherever their home was during the pandemic. Having people who had booked travel through Concur, we could assist them much more easily. So now they want all Tulane travelers to book through central booking, if at all possible. Next slide. But it is, there are a few caveats, right? So first of all, the dates of the semesters, especially final exams, are subject to change. So we do want to make sure that students know that they may have to change their flight schedule at the end of the semester. They cannot miss their final exams. They are subject to the academic calendar of the host institution. And if an exam gets changed and they have to change their flight, then they have to change their flight. In general, we do counsel students to wait to book the return flight or to maybe book a changeable flight or something like that. And if a student cannot book via Concur, for example, like if they're using points, I'm pretty sure that Concur can't book using points. They need to email travel@tulane.edu. That's the travel management office at Tulane, to request an exception to the travel policy. Once that exception is approved, then students have to enroll themselves in the Crisis 24 Emergency Management Service, which we'll talk about in a little while. Next slide. Okay, so let's go over a few logistics about passports and visas. We'll start with passports. All passports must be valid for at least 6 months after the study abroad program ends. So, and a lot of times countries will restrict travel if the expiration date of the passport is considered to be too soon. So we're telling students to make sure that their passport does not expire before June of 2027, because most of our exchange partnerships, the semester ends in December of 2026. So you need to give yourself a 6-month window. If the student's passport is going to expire before June of 2027, we do recommend that they get a new passport. If they don't have a passport that meets those criteria, or they don't have a passport, they need to do that now. Actually, they should have done it a couple months ago, And definitely they need to request expedited service, which is usually about 2 to 3 weeks. If the current passport was issued prior to age 16, they cannot renew the passport. They have to get a new passport, which can take a little longer than a regular renewal. And then if a student is traveling internationally during an expected visa processing time, they may need a second US passport. And our office can provide basic advice on this. So if a student is facing that situation, they should make an appointment and come to see us, or they can email us at freemanabroad@tulane.edu. Next slide. Visas. Oh, I'm sorry about the shading in this. Most countries require a student visa, but some do not. So we recommend that students use the visa wizard on many consular websites to determine whether they need to apply for a student visa and what type of visa is needed. Every country is different. Every student must apply for their visa independently. Requirements and timelines vary depending on the country and the consulate. So even, for example, the Spanish consulate in Miami has some processing time from the Spanish consulate in New York, which has a different processing time to the consulate in Houston. And that's within all, that's Spain. We're not talking about the Italian consulates or the French consulates. In general, requirements are very detailed and students really have to read those instructions very carefully. This is another one of those things where I tell students they need to read stuff at least like 3 times before it starts to really sink in. It's all that like kind of government speak that they kind of have to get used to. Lack of attention to detail can result in visa processing delays and or rejections of a student's application. So it is really important that they're reading this stuff carefully and taking it very seriously. And again, like we said earlier, we cannot intervene on behalf of a student and we can't request information on updates from consular offices. And we certainly have no sway with a country's immigration and or consular offices. We just can't intervene in that process. Next slide. All right, so the Spanish student visa, that is one service that we do provide, is that we do batch visa processing for our students going to Spain. We did have 57 students opt into this process this year. Once BLS, so we submit them to this company, this agency called BLS International Houston. They process the applications and then they submit them to the Spanish consulate. Once the Spanish consulate gets it, it takes up to 8 weeks for those visas to be processed. BLS notifies students via text when their passport is being shipped back to them or if they need further documentation. And if a student didn't apply via the batch service, they certainly can apply independently via the Spanish consulate under which the jurisdiction their home address falls, or via the Houston consulate, the Spanish consulate in Houston. And if a student has questions about that, they can certainly reach out to us. But each consulate is going to be slightly different. So it is important that they're checking the exact consulate that they're going to apply through. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about some finances. In general, the costs paid to Tulane are students' base tuition, the academic fee, and the study abroad fee. Costs not paid to Tulane are all the other things, right? Housing, travel, passport visa costs, personal expenses, local transportation, travel on weekends, you name it. So, what's not mentioned in here is classroom materials. Those are also, paid for by the student. I do have good news. Most other countries, classroom materials are nowhere near as expensive as the US. So you might see a little cost saving there. We do have a costs tab on each of our program brochure pages. So if you visit our program, our website, browse to your student's program and click on the costs tab, you can see that breakdown of the estimated cost of attendance. And that'll give you a sense of what it would take for one semester in that place. Next slide. Billing is handled through Tulane accounts receivable, and disbursement of scholarships and financial aid occur according to the Tulane academic calendar and fee payment deadlines. So that's an important thing to remember. The student is going to classes at the host institution and abiding by their academic calendar, but they're paying fees and they're confirming their registration because they're maintaining their Tulane status. They're doing that according to the Tulane academic calendar. So we don't want to see any students miss those deadlines and incur any late fees. They need to be paying attention to their Tulane email as well as their partner institution email. Students are not paying tuition to the host institution. So if you're ever in a situation where the host institution is telling you you need to, then I need to know. Students do pay all additional expenses directly to whatever source. So whatever housing source they book, they would pay for that directly. Now, the $500 non-refundable commitment deposit, as long as the student participates in the program, it is returned to the student's account, so through Gibson, after the program start date and after we confirm that the student is in attendance on site. If a student decides to not to participate in a program for whatever reason, they do forfeit this deposit. That's the only case where it's not refundable. The deposit does go back to the student as long as they participate. Next slide, please. Academics. Let's talk about this. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so this is a bit getting in the weeds. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. In general, all students are specifically enrolled in a 12-credit placeholder course at Tulane. They should already be enrolled. And that holds their kind of place at Tulane and keeps them active as a Tulane student and makes it possible for them to do what they normally do at Tulane. The study abroad classes are basically all 5380, 5390, or some variation thereof class numbers. Those are generic class numbers. So a student might take 2 management 5380 classes in a semester, and those are 2 separate classes. It also doesn't mean that those are 5,000 level equivalents. It just means they're study abroad classes. So it doesn't indicate an actual course content. In general, those business 5380, 5390 classes automatically count as either general business elective or major elective credits for our business students. In general, students cannot take core courses, and that includes their kind of basic business core courses in their block. I'm thinking of their degree audit. I don't know if you've ever looked at your student's degree audit, but the main business core is in a big block kind of in the middle of it, but also any major core courses. So for example, a finance major should not take corporate finance abroad. They are required to take that on campus. Business minor classes cannot be taken abroad. Certificate classes, however, this is new. They can take up to 1 class abroad, but it has to be approved by the certificate faculty. So we have seen some students get study abroad credits to count towards their energy certificate or their business analytics and AI certificate. So there are opportunities for students to use these study abroad credits towards their additional Tulane pursuits in business. Non-business classes taken abroad may count towards non-business requirements, and they have to be approved by the corresponding department. You know, econ is a big one, right? Most of our partners have economics classes because economics is often in schools of business, but at Tulane they're not. So if a student has an econ minor or a double major with econ, they can often use their study abroad credits towards those requirements. They just have to have permission from the econ department. All students are required to submit what we call a learning agreement to our office prior to their semester abroad, and then afterwards they file their changes with our office. And what this does is it allows us to have those touch points with your student to make sure that what they're taking abroad will hopefully count towards their business degree. We want to maximize those credits, and we want to avoid as much as possible your student taking a class that maybe will end up not counting towards whatever degree requirement they think it's going to count towards. In general, we review the learning agreements first, and then the student's major advisor or business academic counselor or business advisor, whatever you want to call their title, is also going to review and sign off on that learning agreement, so that we've got like those 2 touch points for each student. We do some pretty heavy academic advising in the business school. We take a lot of pride in trying to really help students navigate that piece of this puzzle. Next slide, please. All right, so as we said before, students must enroll in courses at the host institution. Those systems, dates, procedures vary widely across the schools, so it's really important for the students to stay well informed of their host institution's policies, procedures, academic calendar, and course offerings. And again, we cannot intervene in any of those policies, procedures, or calendars of our partners. Next slide, please. All right, so while the student is abroad, we do ask that they report their changes in enrollment. We call that a change form. So essentially, they file with us before they study abroad as to what they think they're going to enroll in. And then after they're there and they go through all their drop ad, they file what we call a change form to say, okay, this is what I'm actually taking. And we can say, okay, well, this is how it's going to count when you come back, so that when they're pre-registering for the spring semester or the following semester during pre-registration, they know what to plan for. Students do need to maintain full-time enrollment, which is the equivalent of 12 Tulane credits at a minimum. And they're not allowed to take business classes on a pass-fail or a satisfactory, unsatisfactory status. The business school does not allow SU courses, graded courses, to count towards the business curriculum. And then finally, academic culture is something that we try to talk to students about, but a lot of times it does kind of surprise students. And so we do ask for family members to kind of think about this. The culture inside the classroom and at the host institution can be very different from institution to institution and from country to country. So it is good for students to kind of familiarize themselves with that local academic culture before attending. Some of these can include like class format, assessment. So like, how is their homework? Are there group assignments? Is there only one final exam for the class? What are teacher-student relationships like? Some countries, they're much more formal and the student is not allowed to question the teacher at all. And in other countries, it's much more relaxed and there's much more interchange between students and professors. In some places, the dress code is much different from what students are used to at Tulane. And so it's kind of important that students think about that before they go, so they don't wind up, like impacting themselves in ways that maybe they could avoid before they go. Next slide, please. All right, let's delve into some health and safety. One thing that we like to point out is that when we start talking about health and safety, we tend to kind of, like think about the big stuff, like what happens if there's a huge health emergency, like a global pandemic or a military coup, right? And we think less about the things like culture shock, dehydration, hunger, homesickness, when we're talking about health and safety. We're often focused on talking about crises, big crises, when we're talking about health and safety. We do have to talk about those things and we have to be prepared for them. We are going to talk about them. But what it's important to remember is that the most common, difficulties that our students face are those things at the bottom of this pyramid. Those culture shock, dehydration is a big thing. You would be surprised. Hunger, students who haven't fed themselves before are in an apartment in a place where, they don't have a student canteen where food is just like, there for them. Substance abuse can be something also. Students are, in a more free environment maybe, and they don't know how to make those good decisions to take care of themselves. hangovers, and homesickness is a big one. And so, we want to make sure that families are ready to support their student in the big crises, but also in those crises that really do rear their heads every semester. And, even students who are the most calm, cool, and collected, generally when they go through something like this, are going to deal with some of those things that that we're talking about here. All right, next slide. I'm trying to be mindful of time. I tend to talk a lot. We do like to remind students and families that even positive stress is stress. So the stress of being selected and thinking about studying abroad, that's stress on your body, just like if something bad happens. So it is important to, continue with your self-care for your family and make sure that your student is encouraged to take care of themselves. This is a huge experience. We want to be excited for students. But it is normal for all of you guys to be kind of nervous and oftentimes overwhelmed. When students are reading about all this visa documentation that they have to put together, it can be overwhelming. And, so sometimes allowing yourself some space to step back and to provide that support for your student in a way that, helps them navigate this process can be really important. Navigating those complex emotions is something that the students are having to deal with, and family members often, if you're not trying to solve it for them, but you're trying to help them work through it, that can be very impactful. So, next slide. We do like to talk about culture shock. We talk about this with our students because a lot of times you're in the middle of it and you don't realize that that's what you're experiencing. And so this W model is something that is, all over, international cultural competency models. It is kind of normal when you're preparing to and going to a new place that you go through that honeymoon phase where everything is amazing, the food is great, yada, yada. And then to maybe dip into that rejection phase, which is an anxious period where you're homesick, you're struggling through miscommunications, maybe something you expected is not what you expected, maybe you don't like the food like you thought you were going to like it. It can look like many different things, but to recognize that that might be the spot that your student is in when they call you at night, upset, and helping them to work through that, because knowing that they need to get to that kind of adjustment and acceptance phase is an important part of their development in this process. And, I think of culture shock as kind of doing this thing because it can come and go in very unanticipated times. I've been through culture shock. I can't even count how many times. But when you realize that that's what you're going through, there's power in that. And so helping your family member get through that process is a big part of what your role can be when you get those scary phone calls, not to, allow it to spiral, maybe deflate and help your student work through whatever it is that they're dealing with. Next slide. Now, sometimes you get those scary phone calls and it could be a mental health issue. Mental health is something that we are recognizing as, a real important part of us developing as humans. And a lot of times people who maybe never have struggled with mental health do, because they're under that, sort of overwhelming anxiety and in those places where things can be very overwhelming. And it's hard to diagnose. So do you know whether your family member is going through just a rough patch or whether they actually need mental health assistance? If there's any inkling that you think your student might need mental health assistance, they should ask for help. You should ask for help on their behalf. You can contact local university staff. They can contact their local university staff. Our partners have resources for students, but they can also reach out to us In big emergencies, definitely we want the student to contact Crisis 24. Crisis 24 does provide comprehensive emergency management services. They have a 24/7 phone number. I'm going to give you that in just a minute. And they assist Tulane with responding to emergency situations. So if a Tulane student calls Crisis 24, someone at Tulane is contacted immediately, and that then activates the phone tree at Tulane so that we can respond appropriately. So it is important to recognize that sometimes students are just anxious and they need to work through whatever it is. But if it really is something where they need some mental health assistance, we can act very quickly, and it's important to get those things in place for our students. Next slide, please. So all of our students are covered by Tulane's International Health Insurance Policy. It is provided by Chubb. I know it's an odd acronym. I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's a comprehensive health insurance policy that is covered. All Tulane travelers are covered by this policy. And so you can visit the website to see the full details on policy benefits, but I have a slide after this that talks about the basics. It is important to know, however, that this does not replace students' domestic health insurance. They need to keep whatever domestic health insurance they have. That is in case they have to come home or get any kind of medical help while they're in the United States. They can't drop their health insurance here. Next slide. So this is the basic coverage that Chubb provides. In general, it's a zero deductible. Medical and security evacuation, as well as medically necessary expenses, are all covered 100%. And of course, pre-existing coverage that, they're treated as any other medical condition. But I do like to also point out that there are some exclusions. And those are things like riding off-road motorized vehicles, or, like e-bikes and e-scooters. Also like extreme sports. There's a list of them in the brochure. So if your traveler is interested in extreme sports, then you'll need additional insurance for them that is not included in the Chubb policy. Next slide, please. This is an example of a student's basic health insurance card. So they can download any of you can download the card. This has all of the kind of contact information as well as the policy number. It is a good idea for students to have this information with them. However, we're going to recommend also that they download the Crisis 24 app, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the next slide, please. Sorry. This is my reiteration that students have to maintain that domestic health insurance coverage. So like if you normally get T-SHIP for your student, then you would continue to have T-SHIP. If you normally get a T-SHIP waiver, then you would do the same thing that you normally do through Tulane to get the T-SHIP waiver, showing that the student has domestic health insurance coverage. All right, next slide. All right, so here's where we're talking about using the Crisis 24 app, which I have several slides talking about Crisis 24 because it's sort of central to our emergency services. Excuse me. But basically, students can use the app to contact Crisis 24 if they need any kind of medical care abroad. So that really is their first place to go if they need a doctor's appointment with a doctor who speaks English, or if they've twisted their ankle and they need to seek emergency medical care, or if they're having a mental health crisis and they need to talk to somebody, they should use the Crisis 24 app. So we generally try to get students to download this app. So please encourage your student to download the app and get it set up on their phone before they go abroad. Next slide, please. What can you do to help support your students' health and safety? You definitely can research on-site support services. You could research local conditions that might impact health. Encourage your student to report any and all Goldman Center accommodations to their host university when they're submitting their secondary application. In general, our partners do provide similar accommodations. They're not required by law to do so, but they do provide quite a lot of support in general, we have found. And plan a method to stay in touch with healthcare providers. So if your student sees a therapist, plan out a way that the student can stay in touch. And then, of course, research medication laws for your host country. Some countries have kind of strict laws about certain medications, certain classes of medications. So it's a good idea to research that kind of thing and do some homework. Next slide. We do like, while the student is abroad, for our family members to stay aware of world news, and we want our students to practice situational awareness. We want everyone to be monitoring the self-care of our students, make sure that they're taking care of themselves. And we want everyone to remember those culture shock and adjustment waves and try to recognize, when is it time to kind of like work through something, or when do you really need to ask for help? And a lot of times family members can really provide that support. We have plenty of Tulane resources that are available to students even while they're abroad, because they maintain their Tulane status. Next slide. Okay, so before they go, we want to be sure that students do download that Crisis 24 Horizons app. We want everyone to research anything that they can about the destination. Travel.state.gov is a good place to start. But there are also other resources out there for researching the destination in terms of safety. And then once all the trip details are known, we want students to enroll in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through the U.S. Department of State. It's called STEP. That is where a traveler notifies the Department of State that they will be in a certain country, and they give them their local contact information. And it basically sits in a spreadsheet that is maintained by the U.S. Department of State for that area, in case there's some sort of an event where they need to assist U.S. citizens in country. So it's not like you're not signing up for anything that is scary. It's just basically, if the U.S. Department of State needs to provide assistance, they have that information. So we have that also in the portal. We want students to upload that information once they do it, but they're not going to do it until they know what their local contact information is. All right, next step. Next slide. Okay, here's where we talk about Crisis 24. What is Crisis 24? It is an agency that we have contracted with to provide all kinds of emergency management services to our travelers. So they can provide pre-travel information. They can help locate and schedule appointments with medical providers while the student is abroad. They can help replace prescription medications sometimes. All kinds of assistance, right? Emergency and urgent medical assistance, inpatient and outpatient case management, medical evacuation and repatriation, natural disaster, political or military situation evacuation. So they really are kind of our boots on the ground for wherever our students are traveling. Next slide, please. How do students enroll in Crisis 24? Basically, if they book their travel through Concur and or World Travel Services, because if they book through World Travel Services, it's booked in Concur, they are automatically enrolled in Crisis 24. So all they have to do is download that app, and they've automatically got their information in Crisis 24. Their flight itinerary is in Crisis 24. And so if they need to like change a flight or deal with the travel agent, it's all kind of in that system together. Next slide. How do students download the app, and what do they do with it? So they can download it from their preferred app store. They can just search for that logo right there. Crisis 24, and they can look for that logo. And in the app, it's got all kinds of features. One of the things that I like is that you can set up alerts, intelligence and alerts there at the bottom. So you can say, okay, I want to hear about these level of alerts in, say, France, and then Crisis 24 will push alerts to you if there's anything going on in France. And you can choose like whether you want to know about weather events, political events, and things like that. It's really pretty comprehensive. You can also use the app to send a crisis signal. You can also use the app to send a safety check-in. So if there is something that goes on, like, I don't know, an earthquake, a student can use the Crisis 24 app to say, I'm okay. And that can help alleviate a lot of fear on the Tulane side while we try to provide that additional assistance. So there's all kinds of things in that Crisis 24 app. So we really do want students to get that going. Next slide, please. How can your student get or stay involved? Basically, they're going to be meeting exchange students from around the world in these classes in general, with the exception of our ICADE partnership in Madrid, where it is sort of dominated by Tulane students. All of our other partnerships, we're sending just a few Tulane students. So they're in classes with students from everywhere. And in general, students report back to us that that's their favorite, most impactful piece of studying abroad is all of the friendships that they forge in their semester abroad. They can certainly join student groups and participate in social events at the host institution. We encourage them to get involved as much as they possibly can. They're going to be in that group of exchange students that all arrive, they go to the orientation, and they're all kind of going through this experience together, but they're all from different places. It's really, I think it's pretty magical. Next slide, please. Here's a video. We're not going to have time. We have to finish this, but when you get sent the copy, you can watch this video. I found this to be a really nice firsthand experience from a student who lived abroad with one of our partners, Vienna University of Economics and Business. And she talks about like what she wishes that she knew. And a lot of that, I think, is really sage advice for our students. So I encourage you to watch it and maybe to have your student watch the video. And I think that's it. Oh no, I'm sorry. I forgot about our exchange students. We have exchange students here on campus. I didn't forget about them, but I forgot about this slide. Who really do provide a lot of, great opportunities for our students to interact with students from these different places. We currently have, I think, about between 35 and 40 students here from our different partners. Last semester, we had about 120. And in general, we like to connect our students with the domestic students. And so we usually do that through the Global Guides student group and at Global Cafe every week. So we want our students to get engaged. All right, I think that's the last slide. So I'm sorry for going a little bit over time. I hope we have a little bit of time for Q&A, Penny.
I'm willing to stay for a few more minutes if you are. So let's see if
Certainly.
how many questions we can take. So
Okay.
so if you have a question at this point, if you'll type that in to the Q&A function, then we'll try to get through as many of those as we can. It was very comprehensive, so I know Mary prepared and provided a lot of detail. And so you all will get access to these slides. You can go back and refer to the specifics again at your leisure. So I'm not seeing any new questions come in, so may have addressed all of those things. So we'll just remind you, if you do have questions about any of the specifics of this, then you can email Freeman Abroad at tulane.edu. If you have general feedback about the family programs webinar series in general, then you're welcome to send those to me at families@tulane.edu. So, so I will close now and just ask anybody who still had a question at this point, email that. You can email it this evening, so they'll have it tomorrow to Freeman Abroad at Tulane. Yeah, Freeman Abroad at tulane.edu. See,
Right.
one question about whether they pay activity fees for Tulane during their semester abroad.
Yeah, we can answer that pretty quickly.
Okay.
They do not pay for the Riley Center, campus activities, or the Student Health Center. They don't pay those fees. And that is listed, we do state that in on the cost tab of each of our brochure pages where we break down, we do that cost breakdown. That is indicated on each of those pages.
Okay.
The Chubb insurance, sorry, I just saw that question. What is the cost of the Chubb insurance? The Chubb insurance is included in the study abroad fee, so students do not pay any additional amount for that.
Okay.
And should I address, there's a question about visa documents. We would ask that you have your student communicate directly with us. There is information on the visa application process in each student's Freeman Abroad portal, but certainly we can help them kind of navigate that as well. They should make an appointment with us. And if you go to our homepage and scroll down, there's a big giant button that says appointments. That's a great way for students to find how to make an appointment with us. It's on the bottom of all of our emails as well. We do encourage students to come and see us as much as they can, or to meet with us via Zoom.
Okay, then I will just
All right.
thank all of the family members for
Uh-oh.
joining us tonight.
Am I frozen?
And then I would like to just offer to Mary and your colleagues, if you have any last final pieces of advice you want to share, we'll let you do that now before we close.
Were you addressing me? I'm
Yes,
sorry, you cut
yes.
out for a minute.
If you have any last piece of advice or anything that Lauren or Aaron would want to contribute to.
Yeah, I think I've said all I've got to say.
Okay.
Lauren or Aaron, do you have anything you want to chime in on?
All good.
Okay.
No, I don't have anything to add. It was very comprehensive.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great evening, and thanks again for joining us.